Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. Clayton Safey alongside Anthony Broom. Chris Ballas not able to make it today. We got a bunch to get to, though, on this episode. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to like the video, subscribe to our channel, and all Michigan fans, special offer for you. Head to thewolverine.com right now. You can use the promo code UM1. That's UM in the numeral 1. For 2 months of premium access for just $1. You can hop on our message board, interact with us, interact with thousands and thousands of Michigan fans on there. You can also get behind the paywall on all of our articles, premium intel, all that over at thewolverine.com right now. Promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. Anthony, it's way too early to talk about football season. We're 200 and something days away, so we're going to do it anyway. The way too early rankings are out for from a bunch of different publications for the 2025 college football season. Michigan shows up in 9 of the 10 that I looked at online. More have come out since then, and Michigan has appeared on some more, but they're in the top 25 in 9 of the 10. They are as high as 12. They are as low as 25 in some of them. I'll read off the 9 different ones that placed Michigan in the top 25. On 3, Andy Staples and Ari Wasserman, our coworkers over there, put Michigan at number 12. Fox Sports also has Michigan at number 12. Action Network has Michigan at 17th. Sporting News has them at 18th. Bleacher Report also at 18th. ESPN.com at 21st. Athlon Sports, number 22, NCAA.com, number 23, and Yahoo Sports puts Michigan in barely at number 25. You're seeing a lot of love right now for Ohio State coming off the national championship. A lot of love for Texas, Penn State, Oregon, Notre Dame. I feel like we do sometimes fall in the trap of, okay, team made the national title game or whatever. They're not going anywhere. They're going to be here to stay. And they probably will be, but it's just way too early to do this. Probably need some more time to see what these rosters are going to look like, separate some of the emotion from the end of the college football season, but it's fun nonetheless. And a lot of people expecting Michigan to take a step forward this season and maybe not be in the college football playoff. Again, things could change, but at least compete to be there.
They should compete to be there. You look at the schedule next year, and it is a lot more forgiving than this year's schedule was. Now, again, you've still got your fair share of questions. How much better is the offensive line going to be? How do you rebound from your best player on offense and arguably your 3 best players on defense heading to the NFL? To me, I think that the Michigan team that we watch this year finished this season as – I forget what the AP poll said. I think maybe they were in the receiving votes category. But when you look at the wins they had to end the year, I think you can make the case they were one of the best 25 teams in the country by the end of this season. So to build off that, especially, we kind of got a sneak peek at what life after Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, Will Johnson, all that was going to look like in that bowl game. You completely revamp the offense. You completely revamp your quarterback room. You make a big NIL investment in a guy like Justice Haynes to round out your running back rotation. I could see a path to them being, obviously in the top 25. Certainly, I think pushing for a spot in that 12-team playoff next year. And I think that's going to right now, to me, that's the expectation. If you ask me, what do you need to see from this program in year 2 under Sherrone Moore? I think if you're not in that 12-team playoff, I think you need to find yourself in the conversation for it and maybe be one of those teams that, we're shaking our fist at the sky that they didn't get in at the end of the year due to the committee ranking the way that they do. So for me, I think that there's enough there to feel good about, at least from a stability perspective. Like, I think the floor is much higher for next year's team than this year's was. However, I think that there's still a lot to work out in spring ball. There's that spring portal period. I don't know how much better they are in some of those key areas. We look at the offensive line, look at wide receiver. So that's what makes me hesitant to maybe say, oh, this is clearly a top 15 team. It's clearly a team that is in the 12-team playoff next year. I think there are data points that could swing in either direction that either gets them in or just barely keeps them out. But right now, I feel pretty good about where they're at.
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, not that this matters all that much, but I feel like there hasn't been much of an argument from Michigan fans seeing, okay, 12th or even 25th, right, in some of these. Because, one, it's so unpredictable at this point. Michigan fans just went through that, where looking back at the way too early rankings from last season that came out the day after Michigan won the national championship, Michigan was top 6 in like the 6 or 7 that we rounded up at that time. They were number 2 in multiple of them. Of course, at the time, Jim Harbaugh was the head coach. J.J. McCarthy was, still had a decision to make. Later that week, he ended up declaring for the NFL draft. But, I think a lot of people at the time of those rankings kind of knew where, some of those things were going to go. J.J. McCarthy likely to go to the NFL, that sort of thing. Jim Harbaugh receiving interest from NFL teams. At the same time, January 20th is later. That's when the national title game was played. There's more clarity on some of the rosters of these teams with the transfer portal. Dust kind of settling a little bit from this past cycle. There'll be more movement in the spring. So maybe it's more accurate. Not really sure. It doesn't really matter. No one really holds these people accountable who come out with these, but it drives some conversation. I will say the thing that annoys me the most about these, and I know I've talked about it in the past, even in August when you see some of these preseason rankings come out, a lot of people, they don't give us the exact criteria. Some of them will use schedule as like, hey, I'm predicting what the order of finish is going to be. And some people are like, hey, these are just the top 25 teams. You could be the number 1 team in the country and play, every other top 10 team, and you may finish number 12 in the rankings or something because you lost 3 or 4 games, and maybe you'd even be lower. But if you factor in schedule, like you said, Michigan could be the number 12 team in the country and has a pretty favorable schedule. Again, we have to see what some of these other teams look like and get into the college football playoffs. So I'm not sure if it's order of finish or who's the best team. I'm not sure they know at this point some of the people ranking them. I will say, I know Andy and Ari from On3, have gone super in depth on this and done multiple podcasts on it. So, I know they've done a ton of research. I know that when they released their top 10 a couple of weeks ago, Brett Bielema tweeted at them and said, hey, put Illinois in. And they did in their next rendition of it. And then they had Bielema on the show today on Thursday. So go check that out. You talk about a coach that is pretty much seeing everything out there. So Illinois is expected to be good. Indiana, people are kind of throwing them in there again as a team that could compete. But, Michigan played 3 out of the top 4 teams in the final AP poll this year. They get Ohio State this year, but they're not going to play Oregon. They don't play Penn State again. They don't play Texas again. I think by nature of the schedule, things could look a lot better, look a lot more smooth. You go through less speed bumps. Maybe you're able to improve throughout the course of the year against, less difficult teams, and that could help you out.
It could. The flip side to that is there someone on this year's schedule that could be, you look at, we can look at it now and say, oh, it looks a lot more forgiving. It looks
sure
a little more manageable, but is there someone on this schedule that is next year's Indiana? Like, I'm not saying this is the case or not, but is Oklahoma a team that stabilizes and is one of those best, 5 or 6 teams in the country, given the changes they made? Is Nebraska finally going to figure out? Is a team like Washington, who's brought in some big names via the portal, and I think Jed Fish is a very good coach, like, are they someone that could take a leap? So there's a lot of those types of variables there. But we know when it comes to Michigan, I think that it's hard for me to not play, when the schedule game is interesting because, now you're seeing this shift where the Big Ten is, I think the Big Ten is obviously, when you look at the last 2 national champions, it is the kind of at the forefront of the sport right now. And I think the top of the Big Ten, those top 4 teams, top maybe 5 teams next year, I think that's better. They're better than what those top 3 or 4 or 5 teams are in the SEC. So is it going to start becoming a case where, you start getting, there's the Big Ten bias. We always talk about the SEC bias and how they rank teams. 3 losses for Michigan could have them right in the mix for a playoff spot next year. So, again, it really just comes down to it's not just we have a pretty good idea of what Michigan's going to be. I don't know that anything that they add in the portal is going to, I think it will be more along the lines of rounding out those particular rooms in terms of, oh gosh, well, they just brought in a bona fide day one starter at offensive tackle, or they just brought in easily the guy that'll be their number one wide receiver. I think that it'll kind of be in the vein that they have been in terms of guys that round out depth, your Amir Halls of the world, your Josh Wallace's of the world. And those additions have worked out pretty well for them. But other than that, I don't know that a whole lot is going to, a whole lot can be done now to change how I view next year's team. I think you're looking at a group that has a chance to go 10-2, could go 9-3. I think any less than that would be pretty disappointing. But to me, still a lot to figure out until we say, all right, clearly a playoff team or clearly a team on the verge of the playoff. I think we're just way too many unknowns across the sport.
Well, let's talk about win total here in just a second, because Vegas, FanDuel did come out with an early regular season over-under on wins for Michigan and 20 other teams across college football. So take a look at that in just a second. But before we do, let's talk about our friends over at Prizepicks Daily Fantasy. It's the most fun way to enjoy watching sports. You can win up to 100 times your money with Prizepicks. You got AFC Championship, NFC Championship this weekend, college basketball, NBA, NHL, all sorts of stuff. And you can just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, and place your entry. It's a great way to test your skills as a fan. Simple and easy to play. You can submit your picks in less than 20 seconds. They got all sorts of great projections out there every single day. You're going to be watching the games anyway. Might as well make it a little bit more fun. And we have a special offer for you. Go to prizepicks.com or the Prizepicks app and use the code Wolverine to receive a guaranteed $50 once you play $5 in lineups. Franz Wagner is back from an injury tonight. He's supposed to be. Hasn't played since early December. I'm going more than 17.5 points against Portland for the Orlando Magic star. They got all sorts of stuff. I got Mitchell Saxon, the St. Mary's forward, who feels like he's been there for 20 years, less than 8.5 rebounds tonight against San Francisco. You can go that deep on it. You can get the St. Mary's San Francisco game. So many more projections out there over on Prizepicks. Sign up today. Get the $50 instantly when you play $5 in lineups. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed as long as you use the promo code Wolverine. It is Prizepicks Daily Fantasy Sports made easy. And we do have some of these lines here. We'll read them off with FanDuel's early odds that came out the next morning after the national championship game. To win the national title next season, Michigan sitting at plus 3,500. Ohio State has the best odds to win it all. Texas, Oregon, Georgia, Penn State, Notre Dame, Alabama, Tennessee, Clemson, LSU, Ole Miss, Texas A&M in that order after Ohio State and before Michigan at 3,500. Win total. Vegas has Michigan at 8.5 wins. That is the 4th highest in the Big Ten. Of course, you do have a tough non-conference game going to Oklahoma in week 2, but Ohio State at 10.5, Oregon at 10.5, Penn State at 9.5, Michigan 8.5. They have USC at 7.5, Indiana at 8.5, Iowa at 6.5. Your thoughts, AB, on these national title odds and the 8.5? I think some Michigan fans that interacted with us after writing those articles said, "Hey, I may take the early over on Michigan at 8.5 because 9-3, 10-2 might feel a little bit more realistic based on the improvements that they could make and the schedule lightening up a little bit."
Yeah, I mean, I would like the over on that, which would be maybe affirming to some and terrifying to others, depending on what you think. Gambling opinions. I think that 9-3 is probably what you're looking at. So that would be the over. Obviously, the other one I thought was interesting. It's not in the lines that you mentioned, but I think I saw that FanDuel or one of the sports books had Ohio State as a 9.5 point favorite at Michigan this year. I mean, I love that. I love Michigan covering that line as it goes for 5 in a row over its hated rivals. on November 29th. So again, it feels right. In a lot of, most people know this, but some may not. Like Vegas lines are typically indicative of are set based on where the money's coming in and where they get it to kind of level out or even out. So I think the people betting on it too kind of see Michigan in that 8 to 9 wins range. So feels right. In terms of plus 3,500 for a national title, I don't know one way or another how to feel about that. I just know that if you see a block M next to something that I felt in the ReliaQuest Bowl, if you were looking to bet that game, Michigan was like a plus 520 on the money line. I see those type of odds with that type of name brand logo next to it. It's worth throwing a couple bucks on. So yeah, we'll see. In terms of national title contention, something I wrote about yesterday is, kind of one of the keys to that is how many NFL draft picks are you going to have the following spring? And typically, at least, the trend from the last 6 years is that it's usually about 10 or more that gets you into that conversation. And I don't think they're quite there yet. So national title, I'm not as bullish as some people might be on that. But 8.5 wins, that feels right to me, and I would go over with that.
Do you think that Michigan will be that Ohio State line? Ohio State favored by 9.5 at Michigan. Over under is 47.5. By the way, do you think it'll be closer? It'll be a tighter line by the time kickoff rolls around in 200 some days or 300 days.
I think it will get tighter. I think that it will probably look something like maybe Ohio State 6.5, 7.5. Them saying, their talent, they're probably 10 points better than Michigan on a neutral field. They're going to lose a lot, but they're still extremely talented. I think, obviously, offensively, we know that they're not going to have issues moving the football. So to me, I think it will tighten up a little bit. If Michigan does what I expect it to do, I think that spread will certainly be inside that 9.5.
You got to take it then. You got to take the Michigan plus. Yeah, it's interesting. This past year, obviously, you were 19.5 point underdogs. In 2023, you were a 3-point favorite. 2022 in Columbus, that was a 9-point spread in favor of Ohio State. 6.5 when you pulled the upset in 2021 in Ann Arbor. So, and that was a Michigan team that, those were all win and in the Big Ten championship type of situation. So,
let me say this. I think the best version of this year's Michigan team probably looks a lot like what that 2021 team did. So if you're saying that 6.5, that was 6.5, that feels right to me.
And I wonder how many points they had to bake in for the mental hurdle that is Michigan. If you're Ohio State, based on, okay, this is what they're bringing back. This is what we would give a team that has these players. And, of course, home field advantage comes into it. But you have Ryan Day, who has lost 4 in a row and clearly has an issue beating Michigan. So yeah, who knows?
I'm waiting for a beat reporter to ask, like, do you even want to beat Michigan, Ryan? Like the same way they would ask Jim Harbaugh, things like that.
Exactly. I will tell you those. I mean, you can say everything you want about the Ohio State media. I mean, they ask some real questions of those dudes down there.
They do. They do,
especially when they're not beating Michigan. And so yeah, it's they're going to have to overcome that. Then they're going to have to come all the way up here. That's what's the great thing about beating Ohio State and Columbus is that that the next time, and this was always depressing when the shoe was on the other foot, Ohio State would come up here and win. You're like, oh shoot, well next year that you got to go there. I mean, it's hard to win down there. Now you beat them down there, they got to come up here. So long ways away, but you got to, what are you doing today to beat Ohio State? What are you doing today to cover the Michigan-Ohio State game? We're doing our part here on the pod.
We talk about them 24/7, 365 if we had to.
That's right. And of course, we've written a little bit about the rivalry this week anyway, so we're doing it all week. But last thing before we move on to basketball preview, Michigan against Purdue on Friday night, talk about where this team is at. There are 3 players on FanDuel, 3 Michigan players with listed odds to win the Heisman Trophy. You may have looked at this already. I'm hoping you did
not.
Okay.
I have not.
Okay. Who are they? And don't pull up FanDuel.
I put my hands up the entire time here.
He just cheats.
Yeah. I will say Jordan Marshall, Bryce Underwood. Like I'm missing one here. Is Mikey Keene on there by virtue of being a quarterback? Those would be my 3 guesses.
You got Jordan Marshall wrong, but the other 2 are on there.
Okay. So is it Justice Haynes?
It is Justice Haynes.
Okay. That's interesting.
So those are the 3. The 2 quarterbacks in contention to win the starting job, Mikey Keene, Fresno State transfer who's played, started 34 games in college, and a freshman who started 0 games and played in 0 games in college. Bryce Underwood is sitting with the best odds to win the Heisman among Michigan players, plus 6,000. Mikey Keene at plus 10,000. Justice Haynes, a real long shot at plus 18,000. But the highest running back is at plus 5,000, Jeremiah Love from Notre Dame. Bryce Underwood is the highest listed freshman in the country on this list. Maybe they're trying to bait people into taking him because it would be fun to have. And no true freshman has ever won the Heisman Trophy, but you can dream a little bit. So 3 guys.
I don't want to be Mr. Negative or Mr. Vibe Killer here. Bryce Underwood's not winning the Heisman next year.
Well, you could say, we could go down the list and say like individually,
sure,
most of these guys aren't going to win it. And you're right. A freshman's not going to win it. Please win it and then clip this and we'll look like idiots, yet we'll be really happy.
I would have never been happier to be wrong.
Yeah,
because I think that would mean some crazy things are afoot.
Right. So. Yeah, it would. You'd probably be undefeated and all that. So getting way ahead of ourselves. But those 3 on the Heisman list, again, what does it mean? Is it too early to talk about this? Yes. Are we going to talk about it? Yes. So that's how it goes.
It's January 23rd. Like, you better just wrap your head around these talking points, folks.
Get ready to learn early Heisman odds, buddy.
That's right.
Let's move on to Michigan basketball. Not too early to talk about tomorrow night's game against Purdue, a huge one. Betting line for that one hasn't come out yet. Ken Palm, though, as I pull it up, has Purdue as a 4-point favorite. So, looking at these teams pretty evenly, you give the 4-point nod to Purdue, based on home court advantage. One of the tougher places to play in the country. Michigan 3-1 on the road. You got the wins over Wisconsin, USC, UCLA. You had the loss last Thursday at Minnesota. Purdue had won 26 straight home games before losing to Ohio State, and kind of a crazy game on Tuesday night. They were up 13.5, 16 at one point in the game, got cold. Ohio State got ridiculously hot. They go on a 15-0 run and kind of stunned that building. I see a lot of Purdue people talking about the turnaround they had. They had gone out west, played Washington, and then Oregon on Saturday, and then a turnaround for a home game after the travel on Tuesday. They will get a week off after this game. Michigan, with some fresh legs, they played Sunday and then Friday being the next game at Purdue. So who knows how much that plays into it, but I do know it was kind of a talking point coming out of West Lafayette after their game on Tuesday. You're going in and playing a team that has maybe the best, I think definitely the best point guard in the conference, maybe in the country, or one of the best in Braden Smith. Big guy, Trey Kaufman-Renn, who's been really, really good this year, 6'9", great on the pick and roll with Braden Smith. Mike Boynton Jr., Michigan assistant today, was talking about how they want to kind of make that a 2-on-2 game, not have to overhelp there, not leave some of the shooters like Fletcher Lawyer and Miles Coven and guys like that, Camden Heide on the wing open for threes. At the same time, it's really tough to deal with. So you have a challenge on defense. It's going to be a challenging environment. Michigan wants to get a little bit more on track, shooting the basketball, finishing at the rim more. Should be a pretty exciting matchup.
Yeah, and a clash of styles too. I mean, Purdue is one of the tempo numbers. They're just outside. I think they're 290, somewhere in the 290s, and obviously Michigan plays somewhere in the top 60. So for me, it's who's game, like who's going to bring their style of game and impose their will on that front? Is Purdue going to be able to slow it down and kind of play more of the grinded out style? Is Michigan going to be able to speed them up and get them into a bit of a shootout? I mean, this is going to be, I think, a tremendous basketball game. It's one where I think if you're looking at Purdue, the fact that they're coming off of a loss, I think that is, I won't say it's not ideal, but I think you're going to get a hungrier, more motivated Purdue team than maybe you would have. Not to say that they weren't going to be motivated regardless, but it's an interesting spot for both of these teams. You don't want to. This is where it kind of benefits a team like Michigan State, where you've got these two kind of contenders going up against each other, and they're going to take a conference loss and see if you can't sort of separate in the standings that way. But for Michigan, we've talked about this for a week now, where when you lose a game like they did at Minnesota, the best way to pay that off is to do it. You got to win probably 2 games somewhere you're not expected to. And, they are not favored and won't be favored to win this game on Friday night, but we've seen them go to Wisconsin and win a tough road game. We've seen them go out west and win a couple tough road games. I don't think they're going to be fazed by this. And, I think that, these last 2 performances, both overtime games, both kind of these coin flip games where against teams that you probably should have ran away from it a little bit more. I think we're going to see a really motivated Michigan team out there, and we're going to see them. I'll just say this. I think this is a game fitting of an 8:00 tip on a Friday night. Like this is a game you plan your day and your night around. And I can't wait to see how it plays out.
Yeah, it is interesting because the Minnesota loss doesn't look as bad. Now they go and win against Iowa on the road. You had Northwestern, who almost beat Michigan, comes in overtime game. Last night, they beat Indiana at home, got red hot shooting the basketball. Ty Berry hit a bunch of threes. They're a tough team to play against, but it doesn't get any easier with Purdue. And Dusty May's talked a lot about the teams trying to muck the game up and play with physicality. And when we run Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden on a ball screen, and they're kind of grabbing Vlad Golden as he tries to dive to the rim, and maybe even putting a smaller guy on Danny Wolf to get right up into him, not let him around him to even use his size down low or make that pass because they're grabbing Vlad. It's going to be a challenge in that regard in that environment as well. I think Michigan's got to avoid foul trouble with the big guys. They've done that successfully over the last couple games, but before that, there was a 3-4 game stretch there where it felt like they couldn't help but get into foul trouble. It will be interesting. Braden Smith is an incredible point guard. He kind of finds these soft spots in the defense, comes around the pick and roll, and can pull up from the mid range. If you go under, he'll shoot a 3. Kaufman Wren, they have great chemistry together. And Dusty May talked about the kind of challenge that it was. He was sitting courtside 2 years ago when Purdue lost to Farley Dickinson in the first round, because guess who was going to play the winner of that game and did play the winner of that game? It was Florida Atlantic. And they ended up getting Farley Dickinson, help spark their run to the Final Four, that they got that matchup, not to take anything away from him. But and he said, he looked tired. They pressed him the whole time. Now he never gets tired. He never looks flustered. And that's exactly right. He did have an off shooting night the other night, 3 of 14 from the field against Ohio State. You kind of think, okay, well, maybe he's not going to do that again, which is a little bit scary. But, defensively, you're going to have to contain him, and the supporting cast is kind of up and down for them. Like they don't have kind of that third, fourth option that maybe a typical Purdue team would have, which they had last year going to the national title game. But talking to Trey Donaldson today, I asked him, what makes them so tough to guard, and he said, yeah, Braden Smith's really good, but they got to guard us too. They got to come down and guard us, and we're really good offense as well. So there's confidence there that this team can get their mojo going in this game. Dusty has talked about wanting to turn teams over more so they can get out and run. To your point on the tempo, it has not Michigan hasn't been able to control the tempo all that well these last couple games against teams that want to slow it down, just like Purdue will. They're going to want to grind you out, play in the half court, get into their screen actions and all that. But if Michigan get out and run it a little bit, get some easy baskets early, I think that would kind of help their belief and their confidence in this game and help silence the crowd a little bit early on.
Yeah, and I think this is a game too where it's kind of funny when you look at the two rosters. Usually, you're preparing for the Purdue team that has the 7 foot plus aliens on the roster. They don't have. I mean, they have a guy, obviously Will Berg, who's 7'2", but Michigan's got two in Danny Wolf and Vlad Golden, who are their best players. I think that's going to play a role in this game. I think in terms of their ability to play physical, and needs two very physical games out of those two guys. And I'm also looking for maybe a guy like Roddy Gale, who I know he's been dealing, working through an injury and been a bit banged up lately, and I thought finished that Northwestern game really well. But this feels like a sneaky spot for him to kind of drop, 16, 17 points and change a game. So I don't know if we're going to do, like, if we're doing game picks. I just have this gut feeling that Michigan's going to go in there and find a way to win and set itself up for, a February and March stretch where there are no gimmies there. And this would be a pretty darn big one to get if you can find a way to do it. So this will be, I think within a 2 or 3 week span, they play Purdue twice. So you're going to get them on February 11th at Chrysler Center. But I just have this sneaking suspicion they're going to go down there and steal one on Friday night.
Yeah, I haven't decided where I'm going with my prediction either, or not either, but yet. But I might be with you there. I feel like that's the thing too. If Purdue comes off a loss, they're going to be extra motivated. Maybe it's a cliche or whatever. Maybe, good teams usually just bounce back because they were going to win anyway. Or maybe they're in a little bit of a funk. And I know it was mostly in the second half of that game because they had a commanding lead at halftime, but who knows, how it goes. Michigan was kind of in a little bit of a funk the last two games too. So it happens to teams. It's going to happen to every team. And maybe Michigan catches them in one of those spots in this game. And you bring up the height. They do have the Jacobson kid. What's his first name? Daniel Jacobson. They're cooking him up in a lab. I swear they just create these big men in a lab. He's 7'4". He doesn't play, but just remember that name in a couple years because just how they roll.
5 years from now, he's going to be the National Player of the Year.
Exactly.
The testing that they do on these guys on the giant, monster island they find them from. It just takes some time to take effect. So
it's insane. But it's a good point to bring up though, because Trey Kaufman-Wren's 6'9", Vlad Golden 7'2", 250 pounds. I know Vlad has talked about, he said this after the Washington game when that great Azabor, who was mediocre Azabor in the second half, but he was elite Azabor in the first half, was kind of, having his way a little bit. I mean, he had 19 in the first half, something like that. Incredible game from him for a while. And, Vlad was like, yeah, I don't like playing against those smaller, big guys that can just back you down and kind of work around you and all that. Well, you're kind of playing against one of them. Trey Kaufman-Wren doesn't look small or play small out there, but I mean, he will be underneath him a little bit. I think the advantage goes to Vlad. Maybe he's just kind of saying that. Maybe he's had a couple experiences, and probably most of the big men he played against at Florida Atlantic were smaller because it's hard to get guys at 7'1" that are skilled like him at the mid-major level. Credit to Dusty May for getting him out of Texas Tech several years ago. But that's a key matchup, how they defend the pick and roll there. And, just Braden Smith had 8 assists the other night. They lose the game. It was more about the shooting. But if you can kind of get him off his game, either he has a bad shooting game or you keep him under, he averages 8.8 assists per game, third in the country. You keep him at 6 or less, something like that, and he shoots okay, I think you can live with that too, because it means maybe the guys around him weren't making as many shots or they weren't getting as many easy looks inside. So it's going to be a really fun game. I think a lot of these Michigan players will benefit from having played in some of those road environments, like you mentioned earlier on in the year. And then Trey Donaldson today talking about the places he's played in, like Rupp Arena. He was saying, the fireworks that go off when they announce the starting lineup and all that indoors at Rupp. He seemed like he's going to be kind of unfazed by it. Of course, some Purdue fan will clip him if they lose the game and he doesn't, make shots or something like that. But I don't know that it's going to have that much of an impact other than the typical home court advantage that you get, kind of more of a boost for a home team. Anything else on this game? I think the defense needs to step up overall. They've kind of talked about that. Mike Boynton said today, and it's true. They've allowed 1 point per possession in 5 straight games, or higher. They want to keep it under that number. So they've taken a little bit of a slide there, and it's not going to be an easy task to hold Purdue in check, but they got to do their best and kind of limit, those 2 guys that we talked about, Fletcher, Lawyer, some of the others.
No other thoughts there. Like you said, like they have slid a bit defensively here of late, but still kind of in that zone you want to be in, just in terms of being inside that top 25 on KenPom, which I'm going to keep saying that. Not that they're a national title contender, but that's the profile that most of these teams have had. And as you will always say, well, is it before or after they win 6 straight games that's the case? And it's after, but it's just to me, always kind of a bit of a guide. So yeah, from there, we'll see what happens. I mean, they'll get Penn State at home on Monday night. They'll go to Rutgers, they'll host Oregon, and then they'll go to Indiana, and they get Purdue back at their place on February 11th. So again, gonna have to, there might be a team that they're supposed to beat somewhere down the road they slip up against, which makes games like this even more important. So find a way to get this Purdue game, make a statement, and hey, see what happens from there.
No doubt. Well, that is going to be our show for today. We'll be back. Not sure about Monday because there is that game against Penn State on Monday. Maybe it'll be earlier in the day, something like that. So keep an eye on podcast feed, YouTube channel. Give us a like on the YouTube channel. Tell us in the comments what's going to happen in Michigan against Purdue. Is Michigan too low, too high in some of these way too early rankings? So leave a comment there on the video here. Head to the Wolverine.com as well. Use the promo code UM1 for 2 months of premium access for just $1. And we will see everyone next time.